The film begins and we see a person injecting egg yolk with a certain substance, and after minutes, the egg yolk becomes two.
The new version becomes identical to the original version. Then we go to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, where workers were making a star in the name of the Oscar-winning actress Elizabeth.
Sparkle, and the crowds were gathering around the star and taking photos of it. And as the years passed, no one cared about Elizabeth's star anymore, because
Elizabeth grew older and was no longer acting like before, and she started presenting fitness programs. And one day, while she was in the studio, she was heading to the ladies' restroom, but she finds it out of order, so she goes into one of the restrooms, and producer Harvey enters behind her while talking on the phone, saying that Elizabeth has become old and the show that's a young and pretty girl, in that it's time for Elizabeth to resign from the program. In the Oscar she won was a long time ago, and people already forgot her, so we should look for a new face. Then he leaves, and Elizabeth gets upset after hearing that. And after a while, she goes to have lunch with producer Harvey, who tells her that people love change, and as a producer, he must give people what they want. And he lets Elizabeth know the program no longer needs her. Then he leaves. And while Elizabeth is going home, she sees workers removing her picture from the billboard, and she gets into an accident. And at the hospital, the doctor takes an x-ray of her bones, and she was fine, and nothing happened to her. The doctor recognizes her as the famous star, and Elizabeth cries because her time has passed. And after a while, a young doctor comes, and he examines Elizabeth's back and tells her that she is suitable for a certain experiment. And Elizabeth doesn't understand what he means. Then she leaves the hospital and notices something in her pocket, finding a flash drive labeled The Substance with a number on the back. And by coincidence, she meets an old school friend named Fred, who is happy to see her and tells her she's still beautiful as she is, and asks to meet and sit somewhere, and writes his number on a paper. And Elizabeth was happy she saw him. Then she goes home and was at the peak of sadness, especially when she received a bouquet of flowers from her colleagues, thanking her for the years they worked together. And Elizabeth decides to play the flash drive she found, and an ad appears about a substance injected into DNA that makes cells replicate themselves into other copies. And what happens is that you copy another version of yourself, and this other version will be more beautiful and younger, meaning there will be two of you living. But there is an important condition,
which is that balance must occur between the two versions, and each version lives for 7 days, then switches with the other version, meaning that when the original version is alive, the new version is unconscious, and when the new version is awake, the original version is
unconscious. And remember that the two of you are one. But Elizabeth is not convinced by this, and throws the flash drive in the trash, then goes to eat in a restaurant, and sees a married couple happy together, and she feels upset because she is alone, looks in the mirror and realizes she is aging, then returns home and remembers the days of fame and stardom, and then seriously thinks about the substance, decides to take the flash drive from the trash and call the number. And she requests the substance, and the person on the phone gives her the address where she will pick it up. Elizabeth writes the address on her hand, and the man hangs up immediately. Elizabeth keeps thinking all night and can't sleep, and in the morning she finds a newspaper ad looking for a TV host to replace Elizabeth, and the applicants must be young and energetic. Then she receives a package in the mail, and inside it there is a card with a number, and she is supposed to collect the substance using this card. So Elizabeth goes to the address to get it. She uses the card she received to open the door, enters the building, opens the locker, takes her substance, and returns home with it. She opens the box and sees what's inside, finding the materials needed to inject herself with the substance, and the items that will make her copy another version of herself. She also finds food for her and the other person, along with cards containing instructions and conditions, and the most important condition is that the switch must happen every 7 days. Elizabeth decides to take the substance, and remembers the media talk that her new version will be younger and more beautiful, and she doesn't hesitate and injects herself. At first, nothing happens, and Elizabeth thinks it's fake, but suddenly she feels dizzy, falls, and starts suffering in pain. Then her back splits open, and another person emerges from her and the cloning process happens. After a few minutes, the new version wakes up, looks in the mirror, and is amazed to find herself truly younger, more beautiful, and full of youth and energy.
Then she stitches the original Elizabeth's back, and Elizabeth becomes completely unconscious, and she inserts a feeding solution into her arm that will nourish her during the 7 days she remains unconscious. The new version sleeps at night, unable to believe the experiment worked, and stands in front of the mirror, admiring her appearance. But suddenly she feels pain and blood comes from her nose, and she remembers that according to the rules, she must daily take a DNA sample from the original version. So she takes the needle, inserts it into the spine, and withdraws the DNA that will last the 7 days, and whenever she delays, the dizziness increases.
As soon as she injects herself with the DNA, the dizziness disappears, and she returns to normal. Then she does some exercises, tests her flexibility, and feels extremely happy with her new body. Then she looks at the advertisement, asking for a young TV host, and Elizabeth doesn't hesitate and decides to apply, stopping to buy. She buys those clothes to impress them, and on the other side there was a committee testing the girls applying for the program, and until now they still hadn't found the right girl. When Elizabeth enters, they are amazed by her beauty and elegance, and Elizabeth calls herself Sue. She makes a big impression on the committee and on producer Harvey, and Harvey decides to choose her to replace Elizabeth and become the show's host. He tells her that she is very beautiful and people will love her, and Sue remembers she must switch with the original Elizabeth every 7 days, so she tells Harvey she will have to travel every 7 days to take care of her sick mother. Harvey doesn't like that and tells her she must find a solution for her mother. Then Sue goes out to the street, and everyone looks at her because of her beauty. She starts shooting her commercials, and the next day she sees a big street advertisement for her new show, prepares for the program, and every day she takes a DNA sample from Elizabeth. Days pass until the 7 days end, and it's time for the switch, so she prepares the materials for the switching process and injects the substance into Elizabeth's body. After completing the steps, Sue loses consciousness. Elizabeth wakes up, and she connects the feeding solution to Sue that will last the 7 days. She goes to the studio and meets Harvey, who treats her badly, gives her old belongings, and tells her to take a book to entertain herself while she sits bored at home. He leaves, and Elizabeth thinks about how awful that producer is. Then she returns home and divides her days and Sue's days. Elizabeth lives her week in extreme boredom because she has neither work nor family. One day she receives a message from the company that made the substance saying the new shipment has arrived in her box. Elizabeth goes to the same address to collect the shipment, which contains food for her and her other version. Days pass. Sue wakes up again and continues her new life, filming commercials, and her popularity keeps increasing over time. One day she decides to break the bathroom, renovate it, and create a room for Elizabeth so she can place Elizabeth's body there. Because of the noise and disturbance, her neighbor complains and knocks on the door. But as soon as he sees Sue's beauty, he calms down completely. He asks if this is Elizabeth's apartment, and Sue tells him that Elizabeth moved out and she is the new queen. Her neighbor greets her, introduces himself, and says his name is Oliver, and he forgets he came to complain. He tells her if she needs any help to tell him because he is free day and night for her, and Sue notices he has fallen for her. She returns to her apartment, moves Elizabeth into her new room, and removes her picture from the wall. Then she appears in the first episode of her show, and Harvey congratulates Sue afterward and tells her she delivered a great performance, and Sue is very proud of herself. The last day of the week arrives, and it is supposed to be the switching time, but Sue does not switch herself. Sue delays switching with Elizabeth because she loved her life so much and wants to continue one more day. She goes out with her new friends and brings her boyfriend home, and they play bride and groom. Meanwhile, Elizabeth inside has drained all her feeding solution, and because Sue is late, blood comes from her nose and she feels dizzy, so she realizes she is late and must perform the switching process. She rushes to the bathroom but doesn't switch with Elizabeth. Instead, she makes a decision she might regret. Takes a new DNA sample from Elizabeth's spinal cord
injects herself with it, then returns to her boyfriend and continues the night with him. After finishing the night, she switches with Elizabeth, and when Elizabeth wakes up, she finds the apartment in chaos and notices her hand has aged in a frightening way. She calls the substance number and tells them what happened, explaining that Sue delayed the switching process for several hours unintentionally. The man on the phone tells her there is no you and her, you are both one, and the deformity that happened was because of the delay. Because any delay you will bear its consequences, and the deformity cannot be treated, so next time don't forget the switching time to avoid anything wrong. After that, Elizabeth cleans the house from last night's party and sees Sue's advertisement on TV and admits Sue is truly beautiful. Then the doorbell rings. Elizabeth drags herself to see who it is, and it turns out to be Oliver asking Sue to come drink something with him in his apartment. He tells her he saw her ad and she was amazing, but Elizabeth doesn't respond at all, so Oliver tells her to take her time and he'll be waiting, then returns to his place. After Elizabeth collects the weekly shipment, she sits in a nearby restaurant and someone there tells her that 7 days is a very long time, and laughs. He also took the substance and deformities appear on his hand because his alternate version delayed, and Elizabeth notices the stitching on his back. She realizes that the old man's alternate version is the doctor she met in the hospital. The old man keeps saying discouraging words, telling her she must be like him. When she returns to her original body, she feels bored and feels she doesn't deserve to live. And he warns her that the alternate version might finish her off and consume her, and Elizabeth gets upset and leaves the place. She goes home, takes Fred's number from earlier, remembers when he told her she is still beautiful, and Elizabeth smiles. She calls him, Fred is surprised she contacted him, and they agree to go out together at night. At night, Elizabeth gets dressed, prepares herself, wears large gloves, and covers her hands. Before leaving, she looks at Sue's advertisement. Elizabeth loses confidence in her beauty and keeps changing her outfit and makeup several times. This makes her late for the meeting. She was about to leave but loses confidence again, goes to the bathroom, and ruins her makeup completely. She doesn't go to meet Fred, and he keeps sending her messages while she doesn't reply to him. She opens the fridge and eats to forget the tension she was in. Then the 7 days pass, Sue's turn comes, and she goes out to see the state of the house. She finds Elizabeth eating a lot of food in front of the TV out of boredom, and she calls the substance company, telling them 7 days is too short for her, and she can't enjoy her life. While the other one spends her 7 days sitting in front of the TV. The man replying tells her there is no you and her, you are both one. Sue gets angry and hangs up on him, and when she returns to the studio, she meets Harvey. He tells her her ratings are very high, and she's achieving great viewership and people love her, so he decides she will host a stronger and better show in the nighttime because viewership is higher then, and it will be a major event. Sue is extremely happy, and since she becomes more famous and busy with ads and programs, she keeps living in her body for more than 7 days, and every day she withdraws a DNA sample from Elizabeth. When Sue finally switches back, Elizabeth is shocked and starts yelling at her body, which now has many deformed parts and damaged hair. She calls the substance number, saying Sue is stealing her time and making her age without caring about the consequences happening to her. The man tells her she can stop the experiment any time, since she is the original version and has the right to stop the substance and live alone in her body. But her body will not return to normal, so Elizabeth decides to continue the experiment because Sue is beautiful, has work, and is achieving great success. Elizabeth continues living like this even though she can barely stand up from the chair because her knees hurt and she stretches her legs with difficulty. She remembers the book Harvey gave her which teaches cooking, so Elizabeth opens it to pass time and learn recipes while watching Sue, who has taken over the programs. Elizabeth mocks her while she talks, and Sue also talks about Elizabeth and mocks her, saying she is an old star whose time has passed. And honestly, I never liked watching her because her show was bad. Elizabeth gets upset hearing this, eats a lot of food, and seriously thinks about canceling the substance completely. The switching day arrives, and Sue gets very angry when she finds the room full of leftover food.
she decides to withdraw many DNA samples from Elizabeth and fills many bottles with it.
Because Sue decides to keep living in her body, 3 months pass, she achieves greater success and her current boyfriend lives with her. One day she finds Elizabeth's DNA samples are no longer usable.
She calls the substance number and explains the situation, and the man tells her this happened because Elizabeth has been unconscious for a long time and must wake up so the DNA inside her remains stable. Sue is shocked because she didn't want to wake Elizabeth since she has an important show tomorrow. The man tells her she must switch with Elizabeth or she will die, and indeed blood starts coming out and she collapses, leaving her with no other choice.
Yet she drags herself on the floor and performs the switching process, and Sue's boyfriend hears noises from the bathroom and goes to check. At that moment, Elizabeth wakes up with her body completely deformed and quickly closes the bathroom door before Sue's boyfriend sees her. She looks at her mirror, gets shocked, and yells at Sue's boyfriend, telling him to leave. He gets scared, not understanding who she is, and leaves in fear. Elizabeth calls the substance number and makes a final decision to stop the experiment.
She puts her photo back in the living room and the next day goes to collect the shipment containing the cancellation materials. She drags Sue's body to the living room and takes out the termination injection, which once given to Sue will end her life completely. She actually injects her but suddenly stops before finishing the dose and spares Sue's life because Sue is living a successful life.
Because Elizabeth knows the taste of success and fame, she stops, changes her mind, and prepares the switching materials. But due to mixing too many substances, Sue wakes up while Elizabeth stays awake and they stare at each other in shock. Sue notices the termination injection and realizes Elizabeth tried to kill her, so she gets furious and attacks her. Elizabeth tries to escape, but Sue chases her mercilessly and smashes her face into the mirror repeatedly until Elizabeth dies. Sue doesn't stop and continues beating her violently to make sure she is dead. At night, she prepares for her show, but her teeth start falling out and her body begins to deteriorate. Because the original version died, Sue's body starts collapsing, and she decides not to smile at all that night so no one notices. When she meets Harvey, she stays silent, doesn't speak, only smiles, and then wants to leave quickly. She finds her nails falling off and her ear dropping, so she runs back home. She finds there's still some substance left and takes it, hoping to clone herself into a better and more beautiful version. But the opposite happens. Sue turns into a monster, and Elizabeth is reborn, with her face appearing on Sue's back. These deformities happen because the substance should only be taken once, and Sue remembers she has a show. She wears the dress, puts on a mask with Elizabeth's face, goes to the studio, and steps on stage like that in front of the audience. She speaks into the microphone, the Elizabeth mask falls, everyone sees her monstrous form, and Sue's body parts begin falling to the ground. Everyone is shocked, and before the show starts, she feels unwell and goes to the bathroom. Sue's body starts falling to the ground. Everyone is shocked, screaming, and they run off the stage in terror, deciding to kill the monster. Someone comes and cuts off her head. Sue's blood splashes over the people, and the stage turns into chaos as they are covered in her blood. Sue runs away with what remains of her body, falls to the ground, her body turns into pieces, and only Elizabeth's face remains. She keeps crawling toward her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and smiles, remembering her days of fame and glory. Then Elizabeth dies and her face melts, and the next morning a cleaning truck washes the blood from the ground and Elizabeth is erased from existence. And here we reach the end of the film. Don't forget to press like and help us reach 8,000 likes for this episode.